Welcome to the Close with One podcast. This is a story about the untold stories from the perspective of CEOs that have looked at it as how do I show up as a person to someone I don't even know where I can create instant trust and connection. And it's so fascinating to hear Matt's story talk about the concept of really building trust and inherently seeing optimism and recognizing that there's a way to do that without being on cruise control in life and go, I'm just going to do another sales call and I'm just going to do another number. And he's found a way and a framework, sort of an embodiment of how to do this so that the community around you grows and you're no longer in cruise control of your life. You feel like there's purpose. And Matt also has had the special experience of working with Simon Sinek.
I swapped these out because I still like the frames. I've had them for a long time, and I loved having a blue light. Even on my laptop a long time ago, I got the matte cover that was like the blue light filtering one. And so always, if I'm up late, I don't want to be kept up even later because I was staring at a screen.
Oh, man.
How you been?
It's been remarkably amazing and remarkably challenging since we last met. I
Oh,
believe
really?
I mentioned that out of the blue. Actually, no, this might not have been something that was even on the radar. My mom has been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Yeah. I
And
remember you said you were going out there to see her, but
yes,
how did the trip go?
I thought, yeah, because I knew we talked about it. The experience of my 4 kids being with her in her presence for 4 days was incredible.
Hmm.
It. I asked my mom afterwards, and she's like, "It was a sincere visit with the kids. They gave me hugs. We spent time together, and they have a lot of gardens in the yard, and when you're there, time stands still and there's like hummingbirds coming in. And it's like you're in this Garden of Eden of sorts.
Yeah.
And that was the experience of 4 days of that. This was for the kids to be with my mom and my dad because I lost an opportunity to say goodbye to my Nana because breast cancer hit her twice. And I was selfish and I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital this week, Dad. And 2 days later, boom, she's gone. And I get that hurt of you just messed up. You missed a chance to see her and say goodbye. It just gave me that hurt. And that's why I do what I do now. And you and I talked about the experience that you had where you got the call and this story made an impact on you.
Oh yeah, very similar experience with my grandfather. And yeah, just missed him by minutes because I just being selfish and taking my time and, being a self-focused college kid and not prioritizing that. And it's, like as right? It's something you live with. It's not like a quick, oh, that sucked and you move on, right? It's like it's sticks with you for the rest of your life. So yeah.
It does, it sticks with you and it creates this imprint or a mold. And the mold gives you a sense of purpose because you're trying to solve for, at least for me, I realized, okay, so if I missed it by 2 days and you talked about minutes, what can I do to enable people to have that additional time where they're able to follow and fulfill a purpose, be there for the final moments in minutes that matter. And I did this project where I was basically did a Shark Tank reverse pitch fest where I was in front of a college class and I said, okay, you have 4 projects that you can pick. This one project that I'm working on, you can reverse gravity and stop time by giving older folks that get assigned to have a walker. As soon as you get a walker, 30 days, you're going to hit your face on the ground and gravity is going to take you out and you're going to lose time to regain your strength and spend your additional moments with your family. And so when I explained that to them about time and gravity, they're like, holy crap, I want to do marketing for that project.
Yeah.
And that pulls it together as one lens of what I feel like I'm called to do, which is watch independently what is it like for one stranger and another to meet, form a trusted connection, and each person gets to their out of their survival tragedy and get to a better place. And I liken it to there's the jungle and there's the roar of the tiger. And the person that's got the fear and the problem looks at 1 rep, 5 reps, 10 reps, 100, and they're like, which way can I go with that person and not get eaten? Because when you're on a sales call and you don't know the other person, you feel like maybe they're just going to like run out of the way and there's going to be this jungle trap and they're going to get caught in the net of, yet again, I picked the wrong person who's going to take all my money and not give me the thing. So that's kind of that piece that connects it all together as I realized that the process of meeting the right trusted people could be a lot better, where the true authentic people get identified through a process of genuine serving and vulnerability, that by the end of that first conversation, there's no need for a second pitch call.
Yeah.
The second call doesn't get ghosted. And they genuinely say, all right, well, where do we start? And can you work with me? Will you work with me? And so the process is flipped where the prospect chases and pursues that authentic person, says, will you help me?
Yeah.
And that actually is the way I think things are more humanly designed to be.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge difference between will you buy my stuff and how can I help you? You know, and like that's the core of it, right? We're so sick of hearing, will you buy my stuff? Um, I probably get 10 to 15 messages every week on LinkedIn that are like, I could give you 8 to 20 high quality leads for coaching businesses. How does that sound good? And I'm just like, I don't know you, I don't trust you. You're just like, that's a copy paste. But someone who shows up curious, someone who shows up like, yeah, I would be happy to help if I can, and also knows when to say, like, actually, we're not a good match. And, I know someone else who might be able to help you better. Like, and I think we talked about that when I was at Zappos. That was one of the things that, I was answering customer service calls the first year I was there, when part of it was phones, part of it was emails. And, one of the reasons that I think a lot of people went to Zappos, it was never the cheapest. Um, you could always find them cheaper somewhere else, right? But yet we had a huge repeat customer base, and it was a relatively low abuse, like policy abuse number, because people wanted to look after the company because they knew they were looking after them, because they knew, like, you call us, you ask about this shoe, and even if it's more expensive, we're not going to push it on you. We'll say, like, hey, like, you know, actually, we think this one's a better match that they don't sell on our website. You go here, and the fact that we would do that would build a ton of trust. And um, you just don't see a lot of that. And I think it's because of what you're talking about, right? There's just like a lack of the connection. It's transaction. It's not about relationship. And it just feels like where we're at right now is everyone's so obsessed with the how do I squeeze the stone as much as I can. And it's like, maybe you should build a rock garden instead of trying to squeeze each individual stone. Well, I don't know. That was a weird metaphor, but
I love that. Bring us back to the origin story of you and your path. I know I've messed up so many things in sales and connecting with people that I tried to solve for that mission. But where does your story begin, and how does that bring us to where you are today? Because it's a remarkable journey that you are doing an incredible thing with your own team, and you're also partnered with Simon Sinek and trusted by him. And this has been a path of awesome authenticity and grit. You didn't
Thank
just
you.
show up and send a letter or an email to Simon and say, "Dear Simon, I want to work with you." No, that's not how
Yeah.
it works, on how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that story in itself is, we could do a whole hour on that. I think for me, when I look back at kind of what really triggered this whole thing, right? Everything is a small set of dominoes you don't really get until you look back. But for me, one of the biggest kind of turning points, or those key moments was, um, so I had grown up like very straight edge, very conservative family. Um, Still to this day have a lot of traditional values. Pretty small town, small community, right? Like my hometown. So Pueblo itself and the entirety of Pueblo and the greater area is like 150,000. But I grew up in Pueblo West, which is a kind of a community on its own out west of Pueblo that's about 30,000. And at least at the time I was there. So it really did feel like a small town. Um, and when you're in a small community like that, it's very easy to get kind of self-contained in your bubble. And so I was, everybody thought the way I thought, and I didn't really have to worry about different perspectives and stuff. And the concept of philosophy had always intrigued me. Partly because it was this thing that I wasn't allowed to do. Because like in our household, the teacher who did philosophy at the high school didn't have a good reputation with Christians in the area, and that was like our whole family was very Christian, and so he had a reputation of like calling out, and he wasn't specifically Christians. I guess it was any religious person, but
Okay.
in our community there wasn't. That was basically it, right? It was like, are you Catholic or Protestant? And that's it. So I never got to go to the class. My mom wouldn't let me. She said, you can't take that class. And so when I got to college, I was like, I'm taking philosophy. I got to know, like, forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
So I took this philosophy class and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just going to do marketing. I was dead set I was going to be an advertising guy. This is pre-Mad Men, but I imagined a Mad Men-esque. I was like, I'm going to make creative ads and that's going to be my life. Um, and I went to this philosophy class and it kind of dawned on me. It was like, week 2 or week 3 of class, and we were sitting there, and I just remember listening to the discussion that was happening. And it wasn't about pushing a specific perspective or view. It was about helping hone your way of thinking. Um, and as we got deeper into this material, it just kind of dawned on me like, man, we're talking about Plato now, a guy that was thousands of years ago, right? And I have no idea who the richest person alive or the fifth richest person in, Greece was at that time. And it kind of like, I was like, wow, like you leave a legacy, you make an impact while you're here on this earth. The people who have endured the test of time change the way we think and act as a species, right? That it kind of dawned on me, right? Like, can you change the way people think? And so I credit that was kind of the moment where I go back and I go, that was the time that it got me away from this, I just want to be rich and famous mode and into let me figure out like having a platform is great, but I want to figure out how I can impact people in a meaningful way. And so fast forward then to that Zappos job. That's probably the second moment. And, I just lucked into that job. I didn't think I was going to do it. I was like, I have a degree, I'm a college graduate. And my friend was trying to refer me. He's like, no, it's a great company, but you got to come in through customer service. And I was like, I'm not taking a customer service job. Well, out of desperation, after a while, after I'd been served some humble pie, I was like, okay, how about that customer service job? So moved out to Vegas, got to know the company, and it was genuinely the first time I had worked for an organization that defaulted to trust, not just in their employees, but with their customers, um, which aligns with my core values, right? I am an optimist, and not in that I expect that everything's going to work out great and nothing bad's ever going to happen. I am an optimist in the sense that like I have more faith in people. Right? I think that at our cores, we're all good. We want to do good. We want to do right by each other. Our circumstances often dictate when we either don't feel like we can or change that up. And so I think our true nature is to do right by one another. And so to work at a company where their default was that, where their assumption was not customers are trying to take advantage of you, and we're going to build every policy to screw them over before they screw us over, like most companies do. I was working for a place that was like, yeah, there might be some bad apples out there who abuse two-way free shipping and all this stuff and a liberal return policy. But those are going to be much fewer and farther between than the everyday person who's just trying to find the right thing for them, you know? And if you do right by people, they generally do right by you. And that's a life philosophy that I've had. And so working for a place that backed that up and you could feel it, it wasn't just lip service. Um, it was an transformative experience for me because I worked with leaders who were human focused, who, you know, went by this mantra of like, if you treat your employees right, they will treat the customer well, and it will be a self-fulfilling cycle. And I saw it firsthand. So so while I was there, I was already kind of in this mindset of like, you know, wow, it's like I felt like such a more full version of myself working there as a result, instead of like living for the weekend like I had been previously, right? A job was just something that drained me. I suddenly worked at a place that I didn't hate and was like, I actually get lit up by the people I work with and the stuff that I do, and I get to do creative things. And sure, I had to, you know, pay my dues on the phones and things like that, and it wasn't my favorite, right? Like I still get anxiety answering even my own personal phone sometimes. So like between customer service calls, it was way crazy. But even then, you know, it was it was a better day. Like my worst days there were better than my best days at a lot of other organizations. And so that was always lingering in the back of my mind. And then Simon's team came and just happened to do a workshop for us. So we were in this transition of, you know, going from a traditional management structure and corporate hierarchy, you know, CEO, directors, and you know all that, right? And they wanted to shake it up, and the CEO brought in this new system we were going to be experimenting with called holacracy, which, you know, our whole idea was like, let's become self-organized. So it's not a hierarchy of people, still a hierarchy of work, but it's not about who's the boss. It's about, you know, getting the work done. And so I really jumped onto that hard. I was one of the advocates, one of the trainers over time that was helping to kind of push that forward. Um, and while we were in that transition, I think because I was so involved in that, there was an opportunity that came up to go through this workshop that Simon's team came in to do. It was about finding your why. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Like I am the type of person who says yes too much. I have a hard time saying no. I am such a people pleaser. And or I should say I have people pleasing tendencies. That is not my identity. I'm trying to work on that. Um, but but yeah, I have those tendencies and they're very much ingrained. And so I would say yes to new projects and new teams and new roles, like, you know, and I was just overwhelmed. I was getting burnt out at a place I loved. And so I had to figure out, you know, and I was at that time, I was in a management role over three different teams. I was on four different teams, but I was on managing three of them. And so I needed to learn about myself if I wanted to be able to lead others. That was the idea. So I was like, cool, let's take this workshop. It's a full day, find your why. Um, and I loved it. You know, I went through it and it wasn't even that like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing myself totally differently. For me, it was almost a more pragmatic thing of like we just blew up our whole um progression structure by making it a fluid organization. So now people who's like, I'm coming in as a junior designer and I want to go to designer and then designer two, director, you know, like that, they no longer had that path because it was a fluid structure. So how do you help people feel their way forward? And so for me, like I'd been struggling with this for several months on trying to solve for that, which we had not done. And so like the pragmatic part of me kicks in after I'm like, wow, if people find their why, that's how they progress through a company, right? Like they can figure out what is that thing that's going to help them feel like the next best version of themselves and plot that course as they go. So a group of us got together and asked their team, like, hey, can you teach us this? We want to do these workshops for everybody who comes through new hire training. And they had never done a train the trainer. And they said, if you agree to be our guinea pigs, then we will, yeah, sure, we'll partner with you on this. And so I think there was a group of like 10 of us total. I think four of us were going to be facilitators. Everybody else was either, kind of overseeing content and development and support and stuff like that. Um, and I was one of the four, maybe it was six, but one of the first group that was going to get certified. And so it was like, several month process that it took to, get in front of the room the first time. And so I just remember I had more fun doing that than I was having in my day job. And, it was a regular thing. And then, I'd get a chance to be in front of a room and it was, I'm an introverted, I'm extroverted leaning introvert. But I am more of an introvert. And so, um, you know, it was nice to have the studying piece, the like working on it piece, but then I could get in front of a room and turn it on. And that was fun. Engaging with people was fun. And seeing them light up, like that was the favorite part of my job. And my day job was, helping someone overcome an obstacle or like, being able to, or hearing someone say like, thank you, you helped me do this, right? That was my favorite part of it. And so um I got done with my terrible first attempt, right? That came down to evaluate. And luckily there was two of us co-facilitating because I would have totally floundered. But we delivered this thing and his team, two of the people came that were evaluating us and, we had our feedback session and afterwards, we went out and had some dinner and they just mentioned to me, like, if you want to do this full time, we're not saying leave your job, like obviously stay where we're at. But if you ever do decide to leave Zappos, like give us a call because we think this is something you'd be pretty good at. And it was just the right time in my career, right? I had just enough things, like I wasn't loving where I was at professionally. Things had started to change behind the scenes with the culture, with the way that the management group was starting to, with the way that Amazon was getting more hands on, like all this stuff was changing. I had actually started looking elsewhere to see if the grass was greener. And had kind of decided like, no, a regular other corporate job wasn't better. I'm going to stay where I'm at. And then all of a sudden they said this, and it was just like another, like, if you don't say yes, you're an idiot. Like, come on. Like, the very few times does the universe ever just hand you a thing and say, this is obviously a moment that's very important for you and can change your life. Um, and so I just, said like, how does January sound? That's when my contract could be done. And so that was kind of the kickoff of it. And, I've been working with his team essentially ever since. I've contracted with them kind of as an external partner and helped develop things, but it has helped me build the world I want to see. Um, and that's, essentially what I'm trying to do with my organization and the book that's coming out is, I have experienced it. I've seen and experienced that work doesn't have to deplete you. It can be a source of strength for you. It can help you become a better version of yourself. And so what I wanted to do was make that my job, help organizations become places where people become like, I'm a better me because I worked there, not I can afford this house because I worked there, but like I love who I am because of the people that I work with and the opportunities I've been given to grow, the leadership that I've seen demonstrated, right? All those things. And that's what I want to dedicate kind of my life to. And so that's what Octopi is dedicated to. And that's what Simon's been doing that work with all of his books and workshops. And so for me, it was a dream opportunity to get to work with someone I really admired, build content and workshops around these ideas that I already loved and agreed with and meet other people who are interested in it. Like that's, I think, been the most unexpected, amazing part of this has been I get to meet people like you. I get to meet people in workshops. I get to meet people on sales and client calls who are, looking to make this change at their organization because it's what they believe. It's not just we're looking to fill a slot. It's I want to make a change and see, our people grow. So it's really cool that I've got to meet, because I do that with my life now, I get to meet people who believe what I believe and want to see that happen in their own way. Um, that was a very long answer to a short question, so I'll just pause right there.
Wow. The tenets that you mentioned of trust, early as a principle, having the optimism that people genuinely are leaning toward good rather than having a strategy of I'm just going to take the classic win lose, and Chris Voss never split the difference. There's some mindsets in there that are incredible. And the way that you talked about organizations today being successful have fluidity, and there isn't this, okay, because your great grandfather carved the marble for the Duomo and then your father did it, and now you're going to do it. Michelangelo, when he started, his father was like, you want to carve marble? What? No, get in the family business, do these other things. And he had to get so scrappy. He had to find a discarded piece of marble that was in the corner, already had a crack. He's like, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to start chipping at it and chipping at it because I believe this is a masterpiece. And just the idea that you now see organizations can help shape people to their masterpiece rather than organizations are paying the bills of the mortgage. Wow. Tell me more about your new book and the principles and what this is going to be like. Even if someone started with you Monday, what does this look like to you?
Well, it's different for everybody. So I'll share a little bit about the book, and then I can talk a little bit about, what the work experience is like. But for me, I started writing this book. So I'm co-authoring this book, but I started writing it solo, and the reason was because I had a bad experience with a previous boss or authority figure, and it really bothered me, and it bothered me for months, and it stuck with me, this bad experience, and I could not figure out why. And it was, when I really reflected on like, why am I still so mad about this a year later, was because of how that person had shown up. And it kind of dawned on me at this part where I was like, Gene's my business partner, and now my co-author, but at that time we were just, doing Octopi stuff together. And we had really kind of struggled with, so the typical model for learning and development stuff is either you're kind of a consultant and you embed and you essentially say like, pay me to come fix your problems, which we knew we didn't want to do because we want to make people self-sufficient. We didn't want to be the, like, great, if you want to keep us around, fantastic, but we don't want you to keep us around because you have to. Um, and so the other way is typically workshops and keynotes, which are usually like one-off, right? It's like bring us in to speak at a conference or to run a workshop for your leadership team, which is great. But at the same time, it's very expensive and not very accessible. If I am just a 5-person startup, I don't have 20 grand to bring in a workshop, like for 2 hours. I've got to spend that on payroll. I got to, worry about all these other things. So that was kind of the idea of like, how do we help people who can't afford the big ticket items in that own way? And so it started off, we were like, empowering merch and, posters and things you could put up in the office and shirts and mugs and stuff like that. And like that's great, but also it doesn't move the needle that much. And so what we kind of realized was a book, if it's like even the higher price books, 25, $30 for like a hardcover, is way more affordable than bringing something, in like a workshop. And so that was kind of like, maybe we should do this. And I had, so you kind of like had that going on while I was coming up with this framework of, how do you better show up as a leader to make sure that the other people don't have the experience that I had. And so that was kind of the birth of it. And so then we looked at, well, that's kind of taking the macro of what we do for organizations, right? How do you make a human focused organization? And how do you shrink that down to the individual level of like, before we try and shift an entire orgs are just groups of people working together. So how do we then change the individual mindset? Because if we just give you a framework and everybody's mindset hasn't changed, you're still going to find a way to do the old things in the new framework. And so, how can we help leaders develop the right mindset to connect better, to form stronger relationships, to build trust with their people, which, you look at the current landscape. And as we were writing this, there's coming out of COVID. It was, we'd just gotten this, I think Vivek Murthy, former US Surgeon General, had put out a report around a loneliness epidemic. And so it kind of like overlaid this, like, to be a better leader, you need to really connect and drive relationships over this backdrop of, and we're feeling more disconnected than ever in general, not just at work, but overall. It was really intriguing for us of how do we kind of solve both problems here. And if you look at it, right, like as you get older, there's like I think the inflection point is in your 20s where the graphs cross, the lines cross of like the people you spend your most time with, right? So it's like alone, it's very, very little at the beginning, right? And then there's parents, and it's like huge at the beginning. And then it's friends, and then there's coworkers, right? And slowly, like the graph really kind of intersects almost all of it kind of in your 20s and late teens, because that's like the transition to college. And then all of a sudden after college, it's just really fast uptick for coworkers. And then you're spending almost all of your time. It doesn't matter if you're married, single, whatever, you're spending almost all of your day with your colleagues. And so we looked at that and we were like, that's the way we change the world is, if we can change the work experience for people and have leaders driving relationship and connection at work, then people are going to be less lonely in general. The people they're going to come to and the burnout and stress that they're constantly feeling, right? Like that's going to start to go down. And so we could solve a lot of what ails the world right now, especially in such a very tense climate like we find ourselves in, by helping fix the workplace. And so the book is really just how do I focus on my scope of control, which is me, and how do I lay the foundation so that people are more willing to and apt to want to connect with me if I'm going to be their manager. um, how do I lead in a way that actually makes them want to follow me instead of me having to coerce them through, I'm the boss and I said so, how do I show up for the people to show them I care, that they're important to me, that they're valuable, that I want them there, and how do I inspire them to do the same? And so that's what the book's all about. We kind of boiled it down to these five, we call them embodiments. And the idea is it's not a skill, it's not a habit. It's you have to become the living representation of kind of like these ideals or principles. And when you can do that, that's when people start to trust that's who you really are. It's not performative. And so the five are, you got to start with curiosity. Then we go to authenticity, care, gratitude, and ownership. And we kind of break down what makes each of those up, how you can kind of do that, work towards embodiment. What are some ideas for practicing that, right? Because you can't just understand and immediately embody, right? You have to be aware, then you have to start to practice it, find ways to bring that idea to life in your own way that work for you. Then you can start to build habits from the ones that stick. And then eventually you'll get to embodiment. And so how do you kind of feel your way through those things? So that's largely, what the book is about.
You're talking about an ecosystem: curiosity, authenticity, gratitude, ownership. And then what was the other one you mentioned?
Care.
So these come together as a principle, and it's as if you've codified this in five core principles, and you went back to Plato in the beginning. If you had a chance to do your TEDx talk and you had 15 minutes and you went through this, I can see you going through this with your framework and then giving examples of, this is how I saw it at Zappos. This is how I've seen it in multiple organizations where you've either had the privilege of doing the why, but then this is the what's next, or how do we make that approachable to so many people. As well known and as famous and as awesome as Simon is, there are still people that I bump into at the airport, wherever, and they're like, what? I haven't heard of this guy. And yet,
Yep,
to
yep.
me, he's like the most successful, well-read, impactful person of an era.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that people don't appreciate that, it's amazing, because I'm seeing you carry the next steps and live out the trust and the optimism and the fluidity of these things. Where People can live this out. They can learn it.
Yeah.
And it's not a forbidden thing to actually show up that way. That's actually what people want when they join a sales call. Is they're like, okay, am I about to lose another hour of my life and then get 5,220 just following up messages? And
Yeah.
do I graciously say I'll take the second call, or have create the lie? My people will call your people. Sure, we can talk next week. Can I have your
Yeah.
pricing or PowerPoint? It looks amazing.
Yeah.
And there's no authenticity there. It's the person that gets on the call, the prospect, classic salesperson. There isn't that connection of trust. And the person that took the risk of putting their time in there realized, wow, in 3 minutes, I could have figured out 33 seconds and 9 seconds whether there's a real connection here. Subconsciously, their mind already knows whether there's a fit or not, whether there's trust or not. And
Yeah.
this is all learnable. And I studied it by looking at 10,000 sales calls, doing ride alongs with other reps. And I'm like an analyst guy that made the biggest sales mistake of his life when I did a report studying what were the top 5, 10, 20 e-commerce sites where you can buy consumer electronics goods, a TV, a speaker. So a Bose or a Harman Kardon, like, what is that going to sound like? At that time, you couldn't go to Amazon and figure out the experience and say, I'm not going to drive to Best Buy. I'm actually just going to see the video experience and look at all the customer testimonials.
Mm-hmm.
When I cranked out my report on all these objective criteria of best place to go, and it had to be somebody else could look at it and say, Mark's right. This algorithm's right. All these things are right. It somehow got into the hands of Jeff Bezos, and he was curious. Wait a minute. This is a different lens and a view of where we are today. And perhaps this framework can help us get to the vision cast of what he was envisioning Amazon would be as an ecosystem. So they call Gomez. And then Julio taps Jill. And Jill's like, oh, that's Mark. He's in my group. I'm going to have to talk to him. And she's like, we're going to Amazon next week. So let's get some tickets and just make sure you're ready. Like, what? She said, yeah, we're going to meet, and here's the agenda. And directors of, I don't know, customer service and warehouse and fulfillment and just everything that you need to replace Best Buy in a digital way. And she said, are you ready? And all the other analysts in the office were like, wow, you get to go? I'm like, well, yeah, I hope I don't mess it up. And the company at the time was like, perfect. We're going to sell our consulting package and all our research reports and teach them everything that they need to know. I fly out all day long. They're asking questions about this and that. And why did we get this number? And what are we missing to be number one in your report? So as I was answering their questions and showing them, well, there's 10 other sites that have this, and here's why it's important. I said to them, this is great for today, but the algorithm shifts all the time. If you're not leading and innovating and moving beyond these other folks, you'll never get there. And at the end of the day on the agenda, it said, I don't even think I noticed this. It said dinner with Jeff Bezos. I'm like, oh, okay. Hopefully I didn't say anything that pissed anyone off. And
like, dinner's canceled. Sorry, no more.
so I'm at dinner with Jill on the waterfront in Seattle, got the reservation, sitting there. I'm starving at this point. I'm mentally depleted, and I'm a Boston guy. So I'm like, all right, don't order the chowder or anything like a burger. Just get something from the Pacific Ocean. I'm like, okay, wild caught salmon, here we go. 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by. I'm like, well, hey, he's busy, future billionaire. I'll cut him some slack. 15 minutes go by, and I walk up. Oh, so Jeff comes in. Mark's over there with Joe. And she looks at me and she's like, he's not coming. He can't make it tonight. And I'm like, oh, did I say something wrong? What happened?
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, you missed your chance. Go back home. This is done. Worst sales mistake of my life. I'm an analyst, not a salesperson. So go back home, get on the red eye. Next day, just doing the regular stuff. And I get a phone call, and it's Seattle area code. I think it's 203. I'm not sure anymore. So I answer the phone. Hello, Jeff. The person on the other end says, no, this is Nate. I'm like, Nate, who? And he's like, Nate, your friend. We went to Babson together. I'm like, oh, yeah, Nate, what are you doing? And why is your number Seattle area code? He's like, well, I took that job at Amazon that I talked about, and I've been there. And why did you call me Jeff? I was like, well, that was Jeff Bezos, and we were supposed to have dinner. And then I got a big humble pie in my face. I should have, in retrospect, said to Jill, okay, who set this up? Get a name or a number or an email? Well, let me call or message them now. Mark's not going back to Seattle, or he's not going back to Boston from Seattle tonight. He's rearranged his plan. What's better for him tomorrow, 10 or 2? I have questions for him and some new insights that I reflected on that would be helpful potentially for his own goals, and offer value. No, I didn't do that. I just realized later, after I studied 10,000 reps and did a bunch of calls on my own, and I remember you saying, I don't like doing the sales calls, and doesn't feel like me. I forced myself to learn this process because I realized time is the most important gift that we all have. And I blew it there. And one of my business partners on that digital marketing agency I built, and I was like, I'm going to scale this to 1 million. I realized I needed to end that, transfer all my clients over, and focus on the one thing I learned at that agency, which was your deck of your beautiful slides, 30 or 60, it doesn't matter. Go to a 0 slide deck, which is no deck at all. Look at the person in the eye and say, why did you even join today?
Yeah.
If there's a Tony Robbins one big thing or something that you're curious about, here's the microphone. I'm going to sit back. If I can serve you, I'll let you know. If you feel like you never want to see me again, please let me know. Like, let's just be real. And it's just like, I keep going back to that moment in that day. I'm like, what else can I learn from that? And Wayne, who was my business partner at that digital marketing agency, is like, hey, Mark, this isn't done. Maybe one day, a business that you consult or advise, or maybe it grows and gets to a point where Amazon's like, that would be cool in our ecosystem. Maybe you can put as one of the criteria, hey, Mark would actually like to meet Jeff this time. He'll treat this time and go on his yacht or whatever and just have a human connection. This isn't about me, but I'm really curious about how I can help other people achieve their mission and their purpose and have enough time to do that. And I love what you were talking about is the measurement of success is how much is someone willing to go to work that day? Are they, is it like they have to, and it's their, it's almost like their jail time experience. Every day you lock yourself in. All right, I'll work from 9 to 5 or 24/7, but they can't wait to break those chains and actually do something else. And I love this story of you of what you're doing. I want people to be able to pre-order this book. Where can people go right now to say, sign me up, I want the book, I want the program, I want the academy, just get me started. Give me a taste. Like, what could I list here in the podcast description as this place to get started?
Yeah. First thing, and by the way, I have so many things I want to touch on that you just raised, because I think you raised a lot of really great. I mean, you got the juices flowing for me, so I want to circle back. Um, but for me right now, so the pre-orders, just message me on LinkedIn. Directly message me, find me on there. I think I'm the only Matt Dunsmoor that has the banner that has me on it. So just find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. That's how we're doing kind of the early signups. We will build a launch page here in a little bit on our website. But I'll announce that once I'm building the list. I kind of want to meet the people, so it goes back to this whole book's about really creating stronger relationships. And so I guess I haven't even said the full title. The full title is The 5 Embodiments, a guide to building stronger relationships, deeper connection, and a workplace that doesn't suck. And so when we this whole book is about how do I build stronger relationships. So I would like to build a relationship with the people who are pre-ordering, who are interested, and once again, me, I've talked about it. I'm not a sales guy, so I'm not going to be like shaking you down if you message me about it, but I'll absolutely, try to get to know you and learn more. And then as far as, for us building content, coming in, doing a program, things like that, just go to octopi.io, octopy.io, and come see what we stand for. Come check out our core tenets of a human-focused organization. Right now we've been, eyeballs deep in building content and workshops around the 5 embodiments, obviously. But we kind of look at it as Octopi is how you scale this idea of the 5 embodiments, right? How do you put this into play, whether you're a 5-person startup or, 300,000 person global organization. So the good news is I've worked with everybody from 5 to 350,000 person organizations. So I've got my feet wet on that. And it starts the same way as you probably would expect at this point in the call of when you contact us, we want to have a call. We don't want to just send you, here's our workshop pricing and stuff like that. 90% of our stuff doesn't come pre-packaged or built. We obviously have kind of skeleton frameworks that we use. There's common definitions and tools that we use, but we want to get to know you on the first call. And it's exactly what you described, right? Of like, when we hop on a call, we want to know, and this comes from my time. I did do some sales work with Simon's team for a little bit when I was first getting started there. And, people will come into a call. I'm sure you know this too, or have experienced this, where they're just like, oh yeah, I know what I want. And you're like, cool, tell me about it. And then they'll say, I want this thing. And you're like, okay, tell me a little bit about what problem you're trying to solve with that. Right. And that when I get on client calls, it's the first thing I ask, right? What made you reach out in the first place? Like what's going on at this moment in time that makes you curious about this specific topic or this specific workshop? And we get into there, and I would say, at this point, well over 50%, probably closer to 75% of people, when we get on that call, I'm like, oh, actually, let's start here. It's a different thing. So that's what you can expect. We'll hop on. We're going to talk through how we can support. We've kind of built up a network of people who, if we don't know how to fix the problem, or if we're not equipped to personally, if it's not in our wheelhouse, we can refer you to some people. But our ideal client is someone who's looking to build not just a one-off. It's a year long, and it's not because we're trying to lock you into revenue. It's because we like to see results. And when you do a one-off event, it can be really inspiring. It can be, it doesn't matter how amazing the workshop or the keynote is. We've all been to conferences before where we heard someone amazing on stage, and you come back and you tell everybody about it. You may even buy the book and send it to people. But if you're the only one beating that drum, or if, you come back from the thing and you're really excited, and then no one's assigned like to take ownership of like moving it forward, if that doesn't happen, if there's no actual support structure built in, we go back to the same tools with the same teams and the same policies, and we start doing the same stuff, no matter how much we want to. So that's why we lean towards programs. We'll absolutely do a one-off. I like to look at it as a try before you buy, even kind of like test the water, see if we're a good fit. But yeah, we try and go towards at least 1 year programs, and we build them custom. So usually it's centered around some live events. We don't do pre-recorded. We will, if you want us to build a course in our LMS, we'll build a custom course for people, and those obviously have pre-recorded elements with videos. But largely, we want to focus it around, hey, let's all either meet on Zoom or let's come to an event you're having in person so we can actually get in the same room and dig in beyond just here's the speech and let's make it real. Let's ask questions, make it real, make it applicable. So that's kind of the sales pitch. Now, I want to rewind because you shared a really amazing story, and I want to, I'm becoming the podcast interviewer here on this one, but I don't know, like what you kind of brought up got me thinking. I'm curious to hear your thoughts because you had mentioned, um, yeah, it's funny because I've had the same reaction of, people are like, yeah, I'm not familiar with Simon, and like me, I've just been so in the world that it's like a bit foreign to me. But I think you and I have that, especially because sales is such a place that start with why is a big deal. And I think part of it is because so many sales teams have, and I hesitate to use the word weaponized it, but used it and I've one of the main groups that I get asking me to come in and do start with why kind of workshops and stuff are sales teams. And it's partly, and I can tell the groups that are taking it seriously and the groups that are just trying to use it as a tool. The ones that are taking it seriously are like, we want our salespeople to understand their why so they can better connect with the person across from them, right? And use that to kind of like sell and connect with the products and help the other person. But a lot of people in sales and marketing in general, uh, they're like, hey, if we can get someone to feel something, that's where we can get them. And therefore, we need to speak with the start with why language, right? And so that I think is a piece of it. But I love that you have this analyst background. And I'm curious your thoughts because as you were sharing kind of this, you went from analyst to then more of a sales mindset. I think it's such a complementary skill set of analysts. I think people think of them as number crunchers. And in reality, their job is creating understanding. It's not about here's what the equation says. It's, yeah, the equation says this, but if you take a broader look, right? If you really want to understand what's going on here, we got to look at this, this, and this, right? And I think if salespeople kind of took more of an approach like that, right? Seeking understanding instead of starting with the sale, starting with I need to hit my quota, but instead, like you said, showed up curious, really wanted to see what does this person need, right? What is the greater context I'm operating in? Um, and then vice versa, right? Like a salesperson would benefit from an analyst mindset, and an analyst would benefit from a sales mindset because you got to put the slides together or you don't, right? Of like, how do you convey those ideas and help other people kind of buy into them? So I'm curious, like, do you see that parallel? And are there other skill sets or mindsets that in when you study those calls or even in the time since you've kind of reflected back on and you're like, man, if people could have this mindset in addition, or this skill set that you wouldn't expect, right? Like great bakers make great sales. I don't know, like something random, but I'm curious, like if you have kind of connected any of those dots as well.
Between being an analyst and then doing sales and sales coaching, there was this incredible chasm. And when I was an analyst, I had also been an analyst at Gartner for SaaS and hardware systems. And we all talk about NVIDIA today. Well, prior to NVIDIA, there was Intel. Mm-hmm. And it's a name from the past, and it's like IBM. Those two have kind of receded where something has gone beyond them. And when I was there, an interesting thing happened. I realized that when people called me and said, what's Microsoft doing? When are they switching to SaaS? What's happening with enterprise? And by the way, what's the cost for those servers and the maintenance package? I said, wait, I feel like a paid spy. No, I'm not. You're an analyst and you have analyst duties and you write reports. It's like, this doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. And even when I had a chance to work with Apple, and my boss, Amy, went on a 2-week vacation to get married and do all that stuff, they asked an amazing question. What's happening with platform as a service, internet as a service, SaaS, device as a service? I'm like, whoa, I don't know any of these acronyms. I don't have any answers. Can I get back to you in a few days? And during those 2 weeks, I reached out to all those companies. I said, okay, these are big questions. I want to know your answers. And when you answer me, I'm going to give you a report of what everyone else said. It's anonymized. So you can't be like, Microsoft is doing this. And when Amy came back from vacation, she's like, I want to see what happened. I said, well, Apple asked me some questions, and I don't know if they like my answers or not. And she reached out and she said, I said, what? She's like, they said that if you, Amy, want to take another vacation or whatever, can we still have Mark? I was like, oh, wow. I'm not going to get pink slipped. And this was an internship while I was a junior in college. And at that moment, I realized you're going to make more impact by leaving being an analyst and becoming a product manager. And it was so hard to become a product manager because I went to a medical technology company and their first criteria was, are you a male nurse? How long have you been a male nurse? And I was like, oh, I can't get a nursing degree on top of my MBA, on top of my undergrad. I was like, no, I'm not a male nurse. But I've been told I ask a lot of questions and I'm super curious. And they asked me, well, why and how? And I explained my story of when my dad said, hey, I wanted to go to college and my dad didn't want me to be a rocket scientist. He wanted me to be a Mason forever. I realized at that moment at 9, in order for me to have that path, I needed to get a job to pay for that. And so embedded in me there was extreme curiosity. And that's the missing piece of the puzzle is when you join a call and you have a conversation, it's your EQ plus your IQ and your curiosity squared. If you don't have extreme curiosity, you're missing the factor of why people hire you, which is you're so curious, you're going to give them the answer because you want the answer first. You can give it over to them gladly because you want to help them rather than, I'm going to take the deal, I'm going to take the money, and I'm going to go to dinner and take grandma out and buy my Maserati. And then the ops team will figure it out for you. I got my piece. What's that engineering figure it out? I was like, well, maybe there's another way. And I realized as a product manager, when they gave me the blessing, they first said, no, we're not hiring you because you're not a male nurse. Go pound sand. A guy in the office named Dennis said, hang on a second. Mark is the son of our greatest engineer he's on his path to 60 patents. Maybe there's something to this guy. Let me talk to him. And Dennis is like, all right, we're not going to hire you because you're not a male nurse. So give me some ammo here. And I shared some of those stories. He's like, okay, fine. I will give you a job. Your assistant to the assistant product manager, like Dwight in the office. And they gave me 0 products that I could do anything with. They didn't need any help. They were high volume, high profit. I couldn't mess them up until there was an opportunity to take a product that had, it was a medical product that had latex in it. And so it would go around the patient's mouth and the nurse would have to touch it. And then I learned that allergies were on the rise for nurses as well as people, and they wanted to get rid of the latex component. So I'm like, this is great. I got a project. Let me go to the company and say, I need engineers. What I didn't realize is that there's 4 other product managers all fighting for these engineers, and I needed the best pitch so that they gave me people to achieve that. And Ron, the CEO, after he sees my conversations, like, this is BS. You're not right, Mark. You're wrong. How could you be right? I said, okay, what happens if I'm wrong? And what happens if I'm right? If I'm right, we go from keeping our 90% market share to not losing it, and we can increase our prices. Or we can take the risk. And by the way, here's the data. The purchasing agents are going to cut us off the list and we're not going to get purchased anymore. In 6 months, we're going to lose everything. Not because I'm saying it, but if I'm going to be the man in the mirror and look at this, I want to show you the future of what they've said, not me. I'm an idiot in the chair that hasn't been out long enough to use your words, be fluid, be open, and trust the buyer and bring that information. He's like, okay, Mark, I will give you 2 engineers, but they're brand new. Don't expect anything to happen out of this. Here's your launch date, and it's going to suck as a product, and you're going to have to redo it. And I looked at Ron, I was like, wait a minute, that's your bar of success? It's going to be late and it's going to be bad, and you're going to have to redo it. I was like, no, no, no. These 2 engineers, thank you. I'm going to sit with them upstairs and we'll do this daily Scrum SaaS Agile model that I learned about in business school. We'll figure it out. We will give you the launch date. And everyone's looking at me like, this guy's going to get canned. You can't talk to the CEO like that. And it was very much, I think I need to prove this and I need help and I don't know what I'm doing. So that was a process of extreme humility to go out to the nurses and say, we could do all these different straps. This is what we have as options for latex free. Feel and smell and stretch them, throw them around the room. What's your favorite? And what I thought was right, they didn't like it all. It didn't feel right. It was the bad color. I said, what's the one you want? They ended up picking one that was a certain color and a certain scent. They actually picked French vanilla. And I asked why. And they're like, it's soothing to us as clinicians, as nurses, and the patients relax too when they smell something nice, because hospitals don't smell nice.
Yeah.
So then it became 9 out of 10 nurses love this product over all the others. And we were able to get a claim with the FDA that this was patient and nurse preferred. They're like, holy crap, how did you do that? I'm like, well, I didn't do it. I listened to them.
Yeah.
And we got a claim. And I was like, you know what? You didn't lose your job. You launched on time. And you did something which the company hadn't seen, which is launch ahead of schedule, exceed your revenue number, and don't have to do re-engineering. I was like, okay, dodged another bullet. And I learned again that I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm curious enough to figure it out because everything's on the line. They didn't need to give me the engineers. They didn't need to trust me. They didn't need to hire me.
It's interesting in that story. It's you displayed the first 3 of the, I mean, all of them were at play there, but the first 3 of the 5 embodiments, and you threw out I love the equation you threw out there earlier, and so I'll bring it back to numbers here. And when we were working on the book, we were trying to pick the order, right? How do we present these? And the reason we picked is not because one or is more important, or you have to do this one in order to do this one, but some of them actually do lay the foundation for others. And what we found was that curiosity, we had to start there, is because it's just so fundamental to connection, to understanding, to all of this stuff, whether it's innovation you're looking for, whether it's better, stronger relationships, whether a deeper connection with someone. If you start with curiosity, it reminds you is that it infuses humility, right? Because it reminds you don't know everything, you don't have all the answers. If you start with curiosity, it puts you in a position where you're just like, I want to understand, I want to learn, I want to try and understand this thing. And the reason we put authenticity second is because we also had this equation, right? And so the 3 parts of authenticity is, the first one, self-awareness. And you can't achieve self-awareness and self-understanding until you've been curious about yourself and curious about your blind spots and curious about why you are the way that you are, right? All of that goes into understanding yourself. And you can't be your truest self if you don't understand what that is. And so that's one of the core pieces. The second one's honesty, right? Do you tell the truth? Right. That's pretty obvious one. And then the third one's vulnerability, which I think is really key in what you talked about there is right. It's like the willingness to stand in your truth, the willingness to take that meaningful risk, even though it might have been scary, even though you're like, I'm going to get fired. No one should talk to the boss this way, whatever, right? Like the willingness to stand in that because you know that that's right, because you know that that is true for you. I understand it, right? And then the third embodiment is care. And the reason we put that third, it used to be second. The reason we put it third is because it is all about showing up in service. And the best way to show up in service is that it is not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. I do this for everybody, but it is, I'm figuring out how I can best show up in service of you. I can't do that without being curious. And I also can't do that in an authentic, like I want to do it in an authentic way that is authentic to me. So like showing up as a caring person, maybe hugging someone for another person. I may be a cards, write you a handwritten note or something like, um, if I came over and hugged you and you know that I'm not a hugger, right? And that I'm like really uncomfortable, right? It's going to come off as inauthentic, right? It's performative. And so this idea of like all three of those sequentially kind of build on and enable one another. And I think in your story, you kind of highlighted each one of those, like the curiosity fueled the service, but the service is actually kind of where you started. It's like, how can I show up? How can I help? How can I take care of you? Um, and so it's just like a really beautiful kind of mix of all those components. And so by starting us off with that equation, I thought it'd be fun to throw that in there for you.
You reminded me of this story that you and I are talking about. People resonate with it in different ways.
Hmm.
So if I were to do the Goodwill Hunting version of this, and you see that massive equation that Matt Damon or Will is trying to solve, and it's like, and no one else can solve it. And he, as he's sweeping the floor, he looks at it, and he's like, done. And the professor was like, what? Who solved this? And no one in the class solved it. And he figures out later, it's the janitor. He's like, what? Wow. In all my brilliance, I couldn't even get to this for years. So I boiled this down to, here's a package for you. We got Einstein's E equals MC squared. In this situation, not scaling growth, but exponential growth, or to exponent your company, E equals modesty times curiosity squared.
Mm.
I'm going to say, I don't even know this, but I'm going to work with you and say, we're going to work together. My curiosity plus my modesty is going to give exponential value, which creates that exponent growth. To me, we could scale a mountain, but guess what? What happens when you get to the top? I don't know. Market shifts, algorithm shift. Unless you have this ability to exponent and constantly serve and support the market and these people in the space that you talk about of optimism and trust and fluidity, you're not going to make it. You're not going to get through the cold start problem that somehow Uber got through, that somehow Amazon got through. They've 78x their company. Apple is probably 24x their company. Microsoft is 18x. All these other companies are far below that and they haven't figured it out. And it comes back to this basic human principle. When we get together as two unknowns, how do we get together and create a known, a greater value of two together?
Mm. Yeah, I love that.
As it relates to you and your mission and your purpose, if there was one nonprofit or organization or foundation that, as people hear this story, be like, I'm curious about that. What's the landing page or the foundation? If I could pop that up right here, right now, what comes to mind today? And you can change it next week and next year because our legacy is about the moment. What could I list here, QR code or name of it, that people could donate time or money to, or even just curiosity? Go, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I know even when you and I talked about doing this interview, you told me you were going to ask this, and I like still hadn't come up with a great answer for you. So I'll throw out one that's not it's not an organization, but I think it's deeply important. It's deeply important to me, right? Because working with Simon, you got to have your why. So my why is to catalyze meaningful mind shifts so that each of us can live more intentionally. And I am convinced more and more every day that most of us are on cruise control, whether we think about it or not. In our lives, in the way that we approach things, we just kind of take it as it's come. And so I think two things. If you can become more active civically in your communities, not just, hey, go volunteer to pick up trash or something like that. Like, yeah, great, absolutely. But I mean, local government, city, county, state government, obviously get out the votes are great as well. But I do mean like volunteer for a council, volunteer to join a board, sit on that. Don't just take things as they are, because you're going to get a deeper understanding and you're going to make better decisions as a result of it. And the other thing is find pockets of underrepresented communities around you. A few weeks, it's probably, a few weeks or maybe even a few months ago at this point, my favorite coffee shop. So I just moved cities. I have been living for the past several years down where I grew up in Pueblo, Colorado. Just recently left there. But there was, when I moved back there, my partner, she had told me about this coffee shop, because I'm a coffee guy. You know this. I'm love my coffee. I've been sipping away at it as we've been on this call. And Pueblo is not known for its coffee scene when I was growing up there. It's not a thing. When I came back from Zappos and then living abroad, I like felt like I was kind of hoity-toity on my coffee. It was like refined palate and all this stuff. And I was like, it's gonna be Starbucks every day. And Kelly had told me about this van. So these people that she knew had taken an old VW bus, converted it into a mobile coffee shop, and it was kind of like not a food truck, but that style, and it was like a pop-up coffee shop. And she's like, you got to go try this place. It's like great word of mouth. So I decided to go do that, and it was amazing. And the thing that blew me away was, it was really good coffee, but people were taking extra long at the front of the line just because they were having a good conversation. And, oh, how's the kids? Like really, it wasn't just this, hey, thanks, next. It was, I'm coming. I want to see you and talk to you and have your coffee, kind of a thing. And so they opened a physical, like permanent location a few years back maybe. And it has become a like focal point of the community in Pueblo for people who feel a little bit underrepresented, who may not feel like they have a ton of personal network. And so it is not, like it's a coffee shop, but it's a community center that just happens to have really good coffee. And I would encourage everyone that watches this to find that in their local community. And you may be in a big city. I guarantee you there's still something there, whether it's an art scene or a small pottery class or whatever it is. Like, find a group that meets at a place that could use your support and frequent it, support it, right? Donate to it. But I think that's going to be largely like different from place to place. So that's my hope, is that you support those kinds of people in your community and they get a little bit more active in your local representation. That's what I got.
Incredible. I love how this has all come together as a way of saying community is a real thing. It's all around you, but you might be missing it. Organizations, companies are creating community, and how responsible do they feel to grow that organization where people want to show up and run to work rather than run away? And the way you talk about all of these things together reshapes the mindset. Thank you so much for spending your time and just your stories.
Well, thank you. I know we went a little long today, but I appreciate it. It was great talking to you.